thanks to all of you for being here. I know that there are some of you who hopefully just saw the posters, but I know we've got representatives from all of the majors in the Kennedy Center. Special thanks to European Studies and our newest academic program at the Kennedy Center, Global Women's Studies, which, if you haven't heard, is now official. Also thanks to Women in Politics from Political Science, Sigma Iota Rho, our International Relations Honor Society, Students for International Development, the International Law Student Association, the Foreign Service Student Association, and the Model UN. All these groups reached out. So hopefully we've got at least as many who are interested, and I know that you'll be rewarded today with our discussion. Karin Hoops Berg is a graduate of the Kennedy Center and also of BYU Law School. She's an award-winning partner at Katten Muchin Rosenman, which is a top national law firm where she focuses on, quote, I'm not a lawyer, so I'll read this, insolvency, bankruptcy, complex loan workouts and restructurings, and secured and unsecured financing. She works with clients at all stages of money lending relationships and across many industries, from healthcare to manufacturing. She's involved in a number of professional associations, too many to keep track of, but she's working currently with the Turnaround Management Association and also as chair of the Chicago network of the International Women's Insolvency and Restructuring Confederation. She continues her BYU relationship by serving on the Kennedy Center International Advisory Board. She's been one of our longest serving members and has been our key contact in Chicago. And so we've been able to host a number of our faculty and friends in Kennedy Center conversations, thanks to Karin. She's also a volunteer leader organizing events and serves as a board member and incoming chapter chair, I believe, as the J. Reuben Clark Law Society Chicago chapter. So that's a little bit about Karin. You're getting to know more about her in our conversation. We've preferred to opt to a discussion format. So again, if we have time, we may even have time for your questions, but we want to talk through a little bit about her experience in a number of different areas. And hopefully it will help you in answering questions and thinking about your future. And as I said, we'll try to leave some time for you for questions as well. So Karin, welcome back to the Kennedy Center. Welcome again to Provo.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here today.
Why don't we start off and just talk a little bit about looking back on your career, your family, your life. What was the value of your Kennedy Center degree?
That's a very good question. Because when I graduated, I kind of thought the same thing, that, well, okay, I've got an international relations degree. What do I do with it? And I didn't go directly into law school. In fact, I wasn't planning to go to law school when I graduated. I was thinking more around business school. In fact, I had a business minor, and I was told you need to go and work for a couple of years, and that's what business schools really like to see. So I ended up at a well-known company here, Franklin Covey, and was there for a couple of years and actually worked my way into their international department, which was different than I anticipated. It was interfacing with some of the stores and things and individuals in different countries, but it wasn't, the international exposure that I thought I would get when I was here. But, in looking back, and actually it was during that experience where I decided that I wanted to do more the law than the business. In fact, that experience led me to one more job before I went to law school. I was doing PR, which I was not a PR major, but there was a tech company that had been started up with some people that had worked at Franklin Covey, and I went over with them. And it was there when I was working on PR. I went to a lot of different junkets and things like that, which was all new to me. But it was there when I was drafting public relations announcements that I had to go and talk with the lawyers. And apparently they were nice lawyers, because that's where I decided that I really wanted to go into law. And business wasn't quite my avenue that I was looking at. And so I did everything that I needed to do. I took the LSAT, I applied, and I ended up at BYU, which I was very grateful for. My husband was at the U, so he wouldn't let us move. And he's still in the room, and nothing's happened yet, so it's been okay. So I ended up at BYU Law School, and it was a different trek to get there. But in law school, and I'm getting to the point where I'm actually answering your question, but in getting there, and then now since law school, I have found that my experience at in international relations, and also I think we'll talk a little bit about it in a little bit as well, is my experience abroad. I did study abroad. It really gave me a full circle, a full understanding of different ways to to handle situations. So I would have to say I have a couple different responses. One is it helped me in my work. It helped me in working with people. Because as part of this program, and one of my favorite, actually there were a couple of favorite classes, I loved cultural geography and I loved history and religions of the world. They were amazing classes and I learned so much about understanding different people from different cultures. And that actually helps me day to day. I don't work in international law. There are very few, I think, that do. But I know that there are those opportunities. But I work in a national law firm, and the matters that we handle on a day-to-day basis involve problems with people from different backgrounds. And most of them are from the United States. But I have learned, and I learned at my experience here, how to view things from different perspectives, and that actually helped in law school as well, and it helps so in not only in the personal in working and Dad, you can sit up there too. Yeah. It's my mother-in-law, so I need to be nice to her. So it helps in it's helped me in personal relationships, but it's also helped me in my legal career as well. In law school, we were talking a little about this earlier, but in law school, you really need to understand, and you're thrown into a lot of analytical problem solving, and you need to figure out how to best represent your client in a different array of scenarios. And you're going to have facts that you don't like, and you're going to need to find facts that you do like. And it's, again, trying to find the right perspective on how to present those facts. And I gained a lot of that ability to look at things from different perspectives from my time here. And which, looking back, I don't think, when you talk about value, I would have to say it is invaluable. I enjoyed my time here because it was something that it was a subject matter that I really enjoyed and I wanted to learn more about. But it helped prepare me not only for, law school, but also for the rest of my life.
That's great. Let me push you a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Were there other professors or classes or undergraduate experiences aside from the study abroad that also, helped you, maybe not Kennedy Center classes, but different undergraduate classes or experiences that kind of pointed you in the direction or helped you before you graduated and were able to go out and kind of figure out where you were headed?
Yeah, I think part of this experience too was getting confidence and gaining confidence. And the professors that really stood out to me are Stan Taylor. He was an amazing professor. And I was talking with somebody from the humanities school a little earlier this morning saying, whenever I write and the passive voice comes up in my writing, there's his class I remember because I learned what the passive voice was and why you shouldn't use that. So almost every single day I catch myself, oh wait, that's passive, I need to change that. So there's number one. But he also was an amazing professor that I learned countless things from. And one was, something I actually passed on to my daughter was when you're proofing a paper, and we, in law, just so you know, just to disclose, at least if you're working at a law firm, you write a lot. You have to read a lot and you write a lot. So it doesn't end just with school. There's still going to be some writing. But he explained to me the best way to proof your paper is to read it out loud. I made my daughter do that now, and she has been able to catch so many things that she hasn't before. But just from a little perspective that way. But and then Dan Nielsen, he's
political science.
Political science professor. He took the time to really, and maybe I was just at that age, and I was a junior at that point, but he took the time to really explain to me how to succeed. And part of it was just how to succeed in his class, but it was on a wider level as well because he took the interest in me. And in fact, he wrote a letter of recommendation for me for law school, and I maintained that relationship. And so it was a lot of those personal type of relationships. Stan Taylor, he was just amazing to learn from, and his stories and his CIA experience, it was just fascinating. So I didn't fall asleep in those classes. But Professor Nielsen's, his was more just gaining confidence. I gained a lot of confidence in myself and my abilities in his class and quite a few other classes that followed.
Interesting. Well, because we're in the Kennedy Center, because study abroad and internships, field studies are such an important part of what we want all of our students and all BYU students to be a part of, you did participate on a study abroad in Vienna. So talk to us about how you chose the program and then what was your experience in Austria?
And even just a little bit of background, I probably should have explained this a little bit more. But I grew up, my mom is German. She grew up and was born, in fact, she's watching my kids right now, so she wasn't able to come. But she grew up, she was born in what is now, well, it was Prussia at the time, but it's now Poland. And when she was 6, 7 years old, her father was fighting in World War II. Germany, of course, as we know, lost. And so he was coming back, and they knew that the Russians were coming in. And so he gathered his family, and they had to flee. So they were fleeing as the Russians were coming in, and I could probably talk at least an hour or two about her story, which I won't. But growing up, I had that appreciation for different, at least for Germany, and her experience and her story, and how precious freedom was for them. Instilled in me as a young age, and so I had an affinity for German. Her family, she grew up there. They eventually made it over to Western Germany, and she was raised in Western Germany. And eventually ended up, she was baptized and made her way over to Utah. And she was the only one. So her whole side of the family, my grandparents and 2 aunts and uncles were in Germany. And when I was young, I was in 5th grade, we went over to visit my grandpa for the first and only time that I met him. And so that was the first time I had my passport. And I was very young still. And it was an experience, it was definitely a cultural experience. I remember coming back thinking, I'm so grateful to be back in the United States. There were some experiences that, my brother and I had a younger brother, and he's 3 years younger than me, so if I was 8, he was somewhere, I was probably around 11, he was probably around 8. We went out and played in a playground at my aunt and uncle's apartment, and a German boy had built a big mound, and we thought we would improve it. So while he was gone, we dug tunnels, and we put little bushes and trees all over it, and he came back and yelled at us in German. He was so mad, and we didn't know what to do, so we went up to my mom and said, "Can you translate what he's saying to us? He's just really mad." And that was, that was my first experience of being frustrated, not understanding somebody who was trying to speak to me in a different language. So after that, I took German. I took German all through middle school and high school. And so when the opportunity came up, I knew I wanted to study abroad. It wasn't ever really a question of studying abroad, it was where. And it was between that and the Jerusalem Center at that time. And Germany, I ended up in Vienna in Austria, but it just resonated with me. And so I knew I'd have an opportunity to go and visit my family while I was out there as well. So I ended up in Vienna. So that's just a little bit of background on me and why I ended up where I am. But that the history and the German, it drew me to Vienna. But in looking back, and I had an opportunity actually. My parents have recently moved, and they went through and they found my journal from when I was in Vienna, and I read through that I had an opportunity the last few weeks to read through that. And it was interesting looking back and just learning different things, and from a perspective of, I guess it was almost 15, 20 years ago, I'm dating myself. But it was interesting reading and learning where I was then and what I gained, because I can tell you right now what I gained, but it's different than when I was that age. And so from looking back in my journal, I gained quite a few things. I gained, again, confidence. There was a frustration and a level of frustration because I had learned German through high school, and my mom didn't speak to us because my dad didn't speak, so we didn't learn it growing up. And I was frustrated, so frustrated that I could not understand the German. And we had German classes, I had German literature class, and throughout my journal, I was very frustrated and down on myself, and then by the end, I learned some German. I was understanding, and I gained a confidence that I didn't know I had before. And then, so, in confidence, but also, I learned a little bit more about cultural differences and cultural sensitivity. The family that I lived with, actually, the father was from Nigeria. He had been persecuted in Nigeria, and he had come over to Vienna and had married a Viennese woman. And it's not what I anticipated either. I anticipated living with a family, probably an LDS family, and everything was going to be nice and, LDS and rosy picture, but it wasn't. And I remember getting there and being a little frustrated at that too, that I'm living with a family that, I couldn't understand German, and I could not understand Nigerian German either. So it made it even more difficult for me, and again, the frustration level was pretty high, at least at the beginning. But in reading through my journal, I really gained a love and appreciation for that family. He explained to me why he came from Nigeria and the different things that he had experienced there. I remember when I first met him, he had a beard, but he had a part on his beard where the hair didn't grow, and he had been injured over in Nigeria, and that was one of the reasons that he came over. There were fights and political unrest when he was there. And so I gained an appreciation that I didn't know that I had for not only Germans, because that's where my affinity lied, right? My family was German, and so I had a connection there. But as I got to know that family and I got to know him, I gained a further appreciation. And I understood that, I think understanding that, tunnel vision, I think a lot of us here in the United States, especially if we haven't had an opportunity to travel abroad, have kind of a tunnel vision and not quite understanding all the things that go on in the world around us. And having that opportunity to go over there and have that experience, especially with the family. I know that I was supposed to be with that family. I learned so much from them. And having that experience really gave me an opportunity to understand different cultures in a way that I never thought I had before. Because I thought, I'm an international relations major. I understand cultures. I've taken cultural geography. I understand. But until you're actually there, it's a completely different perspective.
That's great. So this is going to be kind of a personal question, but this is, I think, a question that a lot of students have. So when we talk about the importance of study abroad, the importance of having international experience, the first question is, well, how am I going to pay for that? And we've asked many different alumni who have talked about the powerful impact their international experience has had. And then that follow-up question, how did you pay for it? How did you afford to go to Vienna?
I couldn't afford it. I took out a loan. And in fact, all of my BYU college experience was through loans. But looking back on that, I would do it again. It took us probably a couple years to pay it off, 10, 15 years, but I think I think we just barely paid all of my school loans off. But it was an invaluable experience again. I would do it again, and I would suggest to anybody who has an opportunity to do it. I think it's worth the loan. I know there's other wonderful opportunities now that you have. But it's worth the time, it's worth the cost. And it's interesting too, reading back again through my journal, I was complaining so much about how much everything cost. The dinners we had to figure out, how to eat on a very small budget. And then we were over there, and I completely forgot this, but there was a tick problem there, and we had to get shots. We were required to get shots, and I had to pay $20 per shot, and that was a lot of money. And so even then, we had to scrimp, I had to save, but it was worth the experience. And again, just that heightened understanding and sensitivity to different types of cultures and backgrounds is invaluable to me, not even just based on that experience, but in everyday life. Like I said, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier that in my legal career, we do, and wherever you end up, you're gonna face and deal with people with different scenarios, different backgrounds, even if you end up not working. I live in Chicago, and we have a ward that a lot of people are from a lot of different backgrounds. And that is true no matter where you end up. You're gonna have people that are raised differently than you were. You need to understand and be able to, in order to move the ball along and in order to progress, you need to be able to understand different perspectives and start with a fundamental level and this is another thing that I gained in Vienna, is a fundamental level that we're all sons and daughters of God. And I remember there was one time in Vienna, this might be a little graphic, but I was sick. I was at school. My stomach wasn't feeling well, so I got on the train to go home. I didn't make it home, and so I had to get off the train. And there was luckily a wastebasket right there. And this woman, she was probably 50. She stopped and gave me a handkerchief, and she said, "Are you okay?" In German, in Austrian German, that I couldn't understand then either. But I knew what she was talking about. And I remember after that experience, just looking up and looking all around, knowing that we're all, I think we all have epiphany moments. And I had a few epiphany moments when I was in Vienna, and that was one of them, that all of these people that I can't even understand what they're saying, they're all sons and daughters of God. They all have the light of Christ in them. And it was an epiphany to me. I've never really thought about that before, that, looking up at the globe, looking up at the map, that there are millions of people throughout the world, but until you actually see them and see their way of life, it's hard to gain an appreciation for the fact that we are all in the same boat. And we all need to see each other that way.
That's great. You talked a little bit about how you ended up in the law. Maybe we can go back later and talk about that. I'd be interested to hear what you consider some of your successes. As you're looking back on your undergraduate and law experience, your study abroad, but also in every aspect of life. What do you consider your successes?
Well, there's going to be work successes and then home successes and personal life successes. I'll start with work. Work success, I've told my daughter before, I don't ever claim to be the smartest person in the room, but I am a hard worker. And the things that I have achieved, it's because I have worked hard. And, it's interesting, I'm probably oversharing, but my patriarchal blessing says I'm going to have to work hard my whole life. And so clearly I wasn't gifted with the talents of, again, I'm not always the smartest person in the room. So I know I need to work hard, and I think my successes have been based upon my hard work. I'm a partner at a national law firm, which doesn't always happen to everyone. Not everyone who starts out at a law firm gets to be a partner. So I've had that success, and I've been able to do that, though with the help of my family and the help of and support of my husband and kids. And which is another success. I have a wonderful husband, I have wonderful children, I have a daughter who's 13 and a son who's 10, and they have their own issues every now and again, every day, but they're good kids, and I appreciate the insight that they give to me on a daily basis with respect to kind of bringing me down sometimes from the level where I am at work. I come home and I'm a mom, and I'm proud of that, and that's a success for me.
So let's talk about the flip side. At BYU especially, students feel an enormous pressure to achieve. It's very competitive, and we all fail. What are some of your failures?
One of my failures that my husband knows about as well. So I'm not sure many of you know how law school works, but and if you do, I'm just going to tell you again. So law school is 3 years. Your first year you work really hard so you can get job opportunities if you want to work at a law firm. So you work really hard to get good grades because that's who the employers are looking at, and that's the time of your law school that they're really looking at. And so when you come back for your second year, in fact, I think they're on placement break right now, right, interviewing. You interview, and you get a job for your second year. And generally, if things go well during that second year, after your second year, that internship or clerkship, you get a job offer. So I worked hard my first year. I wasn't number one in my class, but I was high enough that I was able to get some good job opportunities, job interviews. And I don't know.
After your first year, you went actually for a month.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll get to that too. My husband, he's very supportive and is always helping me out. So after my second year, I chose a job. I had a couple opportunities, a couple job opportunities, and I decided we wanted to stay in Utah. And I worked hard that summer, and they told me after that summer that they had frozen their hiring, and they couldn't offer any jobs. The economy had dipped a little bit, and so I went back to my third year without a job, which is not a place that you want to be. At least that's not a place that I wanted to be. So I started sending out resumes, and nobody wants really a third year. I mean, a law school, they've already had, they have the same summers that I was doing, and they've already made their job offers. And so I probably sent out 100 different letters with my resumes. I was focusing on New York, I was focusing on DC, and I got back 99 rejections. And it was hard. It was a very difficult time for me because I was of the same mind that, I've done everything I'm supposed to be doing. Why is this happening? Why did this happen to me? And it happened to be that I had a professor at the law school that I did research for, and she knew somebody in Chicago, and they gave me a job opportunity, and I flew out there and interviewed, and it was in bankruptcy, and of course, the economy was not doing well at that time, so bankruptcy was hot, and they needed some people out there. So I was able to navigate my way through what I thought was a failure, and ended up in Chicago, where I know we're supposed to be. I wouldn't have ended up in Chicago otherwise. So I'd have to say, failures we learn from, but I think some of the failures are put in our way so that we can get to the right place that we're supposed to be to, and it's hard to see that right in the middle. But looking back now that I've got kind of more 20/20 hindsight, I can see that I needed to go through that time period where I was angry. I was very frustrated, but it led me where I needed to be ultimately.
So for those of us who don't really know how a law firm works, talk us through what's a typical day like for you, and maybe what's a typical day like for an associate or someone else, maybe more junior at the law firm.
Well, as an associate, if you work at a law firm, you work a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There's a lot of work that goes on. In fact, I remember being a first year, and somebody, or maybe it was during my summer, and somebody had said, well, so-and-so was working till 8 or 9 o'clock, and that just floored me. I did not understand that before I started at law school, or at a law firm. So there's a lot of work, but at the same time, it is very rewarding. I've been able to, I represent banks, so it's kind of one of those things. I was actually just talking to someone on the train yesterday. I forgot yesterday. So on the train ride, I went into work yesterday in Chicago, and on the train ride, I sat by somebody, and he saw me working, and he said, "Oh, are you an attorney?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I work at the public defender's office." And he was telling me all these wonderful things that he had done, and there was somebody that had been in prison for 26 years wrongfully that he helped get out of prison. And I kind of left thinking, well, I help banks get money back from the people that they lend money to. So, where's the job? Where's the satisfaction there? But there is satisfaction, and satisfaction is part that I'm able to provide for my family. My husband is a wonderful, supportive man, and if we have enough time, I can sing his praises. He's been there for me, and he's been a stay-at-home dad, and which hasn't been easy. I mean, especially, we can talk a little bit about this as well, but especially in the culture, the LDS culture, we have run into people who, especially when we're new to wards, when we've moved around, that think that he's lazy. They've told him, "So are you lazy? Why do you stay at home and make your wife work?" I mean, it's just interesting, the things that come out. And so he's had to deal with just as much as I have had to deal with cultural issues and things of that nature. But I even forgot where we are on the question.
Well, we're talking about,
question was I answering?
we're talking about typical day.
Typical day. See, apparently I don't have a typical day, which is true, and which is one of the things I really enjoy about it as well. In my area of work, I do represent banks, but I end up, I go to court, but I also do a lot of more document writing and contract writing and things like that. In fact, I was up this morning finishing up some contracts to send them out for the client to look at. So it's fascinating to me, and it's not boring. There was a time in my legal career where I did something a little bit different, and it was kind of repetitive, and I got a little bit bored with that. So I ended up in bankruptcy and restructuring, and have really enjoyed it. So I guess a typical day. There's clients that demand things and want things, and we do what we can to make our clients, keep them happy, and keep them on the right path. But the interesting thing is that the clients come to you with the knowledge that they don't understand all the laws. And so that's one part that I really enjoy is knowing that they come to me in confidence to try to solve their problems, and try to not only solve the current problems, but as we draft contracts and things like that, which gets a little, I'm sure this aspect of it, it's kind of boring. But as part of the drafting, you have to decide, and you have to kind of almost have a crystal ball as to what kind of problems could come up in the future, and how can I help my clients in making a contract or putting the words together right, that they're going to bypass some of those problems.
So a lot of writing, meeting with clients.
Yeah.
Is there a typical day, or do you meet with clients certain days, or what's the variety?
Well, the interesting thing, because it's a national law firm, and because of the way that our world is now, most of my clients are in DC and New York, so I don't see them very often. I talk to them and email them on a daily basis. But it's a lot of answering questions. I get a lot of calls from clients and trying to figure out, we have this deal, and how should we structure this? To we have a bankruptcy, how should we deal with this, and how can we best protect their company's interests as well? Because at the end of the day, I mean, one of the things that I've had to learn too, And I think, again, going back to perspectives and understanding perspectives is when you're working with other people, when I work with clients, they have a family, they have a job that they're trying to protect as well. They don't want to lose their job, and they're looking for me to help them in their realm of life as well. And so it's, again, trying to put yourself in the place of somebody else to understand fully what their needs are and try to address those needs and service those needs.
That's great. Let's go back. You were talking about your husband. How do you and your husband, what do you do to make it work as a family, as a couple? You talked a little bit about that, but tell us a little bit more.
Well, I think it's going to be different for every single, person out there. But for us, we've made it work mostly because he's been completely supportive, and I owe a lot to him. And I was talking with somebody earlier. I think she was in the room, but she also had she was an attorney, and she had a husband that stayed at home as well. And not that works for everybody. There are some individuals that I work with. There's a lot of them whose husbands work as well, and they have nannies, and they make that work. But for us, we thought it was important to have one of us home, at least when our kids were young. And he did that, and that wasn't easy for him. And so, but it was interesting too, because there were times in my life where I would get jealous of him, because he would be home with the kids and spending more time with the kids than I was able to spend. But in working through and having a good relationship, an open relationship, and figuring out kind of what areas do we really want to focus on? I know, Renata, you had had helped write a paper about housework, and housework is a big deal. It's amazing how it creeps in and how it affects a relationship. And so we've had to grapple with that at the beginning and figure out how best works for us. And then now that our kids are getting older, making sure that they're involved as well. Because there's nothing more frustrating than working long hours, especially as an associate, and coming home and then having to clean the house all weekend. I was not a happy person during that time, and so we figured it out and we made it work. So I guess a lot of it is flexibility, but a lot of it is also making sure that we are supportive of each other, because he needs support as well.
So you kind of answered this a little bit, but maybe I'll ask it in a different way. But have you felt that you've had to address sexism at work? Has that been an issue that you've had to? How have you addressed that throughout your career?
Well, the interesting thing is, at least in the legal career and the legal field, I'm coming in, and I graduated in 2003 from law school, so I've been working about 14 years. And I came in at a time where a lot of there were a lot of great women ahead of me that blazed the trail. A lot of things were already out in the open. And so, a lot of the issues with maternity leave and things like that had been dealt with. They're still working through those types of things. But so it isn't really the overt sexism. It's kind of more the cultural type of sexism. And those are the things that I think, for anybody on both sides, men and women, I think there's different aspects of sexism on both sides. But I think you definitely need to have a little bit of thick skin, but you also need to have perseverance as well. Because anytime you're dealing, in fact, I was just at a luncheon yesterday where it was a women's working luncheon, and it was actually the Working Mothers magazine. They were providing awards to law firms that are doing well in women issues. And so I attended that, and there was a panel and a discussion about these types of issues. And the problem is that, at least in the legal field, is that there's a lot of women attorneys and a lot of minority attorneys now that start out, but they're not getting to the ranks where they need to be in management and those types of things. And it's been that way, and everybody's still kind of scratching their heads as to why is that happening. And one of the things that popped up that somebody had said is that women and men too, as they're trying to work through their career and think ahead, they think, well, I just got married, so I want to have kids, and so I need to stop. But that's not necessarily, you don't need to stop yet. You can continue, there's different paths. A lot of different companies, and especially the ones that I heard speak yesterday, they're trying to work with men and women. I mean, there's paternal leaves, and they're working through so many different issues and making sure that people get the training that they need. And so, it's not really overt sexism at this point. At least in the career aspect of it. But there's an underlying tone, and there's generational issues as well. When when I was working and decided to go to law school and got into law school, I went and told the people that I was working with, which was this tech company, and I was surprised at some of the reactions, and I think it was a generational type of issue as well. But one was, well, why would you go to law school? You're a woman. And I was like, okay, that's not what I expected. But, I'm not going to change his mind. So I said, you can have your opinion, but I'm going to law school, and what you say is going to change my mind. So in some circumstances, you need to have thick skin. But I think as a long-term goal, I think we all need to work together to make sure that we all are treated the same. And it's a lot of education, and it's a long-term process. And I think it happens too inside the church as well. I worked in Chicago for a year, and then we moved back to Utah for a couple of years. And the culture was difficult for me. And that's one of the reasons we decided to move outside of Utah again. It was difficult. It was difficult, the LDS culture, being a working mom, and my husband staying at home. We had one comment that I won't mention here, but it was very offensive about my husband. And it left me scratching my head, and I kept thinking, well, it's got to be better, right? There's got to be somewhere else that we can go. And so we ended up back in Chicago, and we love it. But again, there's cultural issues. I mean, it's somebody from my ward in Chicago moved out to, how long have you been out here? A year now? A year. So they moved out to Provo. But it's interesting. I mean, the cultural issues, LDS cultural issues, they're cultural issues no matter where you go. But it was different for me outside of Utah, and that's why we ended up in Utah. But I'm actually just recently the young women's president in our ward, and trying to view and help the young women now from their age and their perspective. Again, it's putting myself in their perspective and how they view things in life right now and how they should be thinking about things. And there's one that is actually a freshman now here at BYU, and she came to me and said she wanted to be a lawyer. And I said, well, that's great, and I think you should definitely pursue that. And I think higher education, everybody should pursue higher education and do as much as you can to get as much education. But I want you to know that you're going to run into some problems and issues that you need to. It should not stop you from doing what you want to do, but I think you should have it in your mind as to how you're going to deal with this when you reach these issues. And one was, being outside, being a working mom. When all the other women at church have their kids and they have play groups, I'm not involved. My kids aren't involved. I mean, my husband didn't really feel comfortable going and hanging out with the women and their children. And so, there's a lot of relationships that are built that I'm kind of on the outside of. So I need to be a lot more proactive than a lot of other women that, have those opportunities to have friendships. And especially being outside of where I grew up, I had to create and build new friendships. And it's something that I've told this young woman that, you need to think about that and think of a way to deal with that as you're working through, your schooling, but as you look further ahead of how you can deal with that and how you can make sure that you're being proactive, because it's a lot more on our shoulders to make those types of relationships and build relationships, where sometimes it comes, at least for me on the outside, it seems like it comes a little more easier.
We could talk about more things with some questions, but what advice have you received that's been helpful for you in navigating all these different aspects of your life?
Well, I think there's different advice from different individuals. One woman, she had been working, it was my third year of law school, and she had been working, and she recently was divorced. And somebody that I had spoken with, an attorney at the law firm that I was going to go work in Chicago, knew her very well and said, you should call her and just talk to her. And one thing that stuck with me is that in life you're going to be busy, especially in a legal career. You're going to have busy times, and you need to be prepared for those busy times. And I think some of, it goes on different levels as well. I mean, there's going to be times in your life where you're going to have trials, you're going to have difficult times, and you need to work through those times. You need to work, at least on the law school or the legal side, you need to work, and you need to work hard during those times. But enjoy the times that are good. Enjoy the times where you don't have as much work, and enjoy your family. Make time for your family and make sure that you're enjoying the things that you should be enjoying and not worrying about, what's next to come. And that was hard for me. I'm a worrier, I'm a control person, and so I like to know what's coming next. And that was something that I had to learn, and a great piece of advice, I think, in any aspect, in any area of life.
And then finally, what advice would you have for students, men and women, as they're kind of finding their way and trying to figure out what's next in their careers, in their families, and in their opportunities to serve?
I think a couple things. One is be flexible. I never in a million years thought I would practice bankruptcy law. I was going to do corporate law, and that's where I ended up that summer. And things worked out where I didn't get the job that I wanted, and I had everything tailored to the way that I wanted it to be. And clearly, again, looking back, the Lord was saying, no, that's not what you need to be. That's not what you need to be doing. And he put a roadblock in my way. And so I needed to be flexible and get through a difficult time to be where I need to be today. And so I think a lot of flexibility, because I was sitting in your chairs, in fact, I think in the same room. There were a lot of different speeches and lectures that I came and heard. But you definitely need to plan out life. You need to have goals, and you need to be working towards those goals. And you need to have steps to get to those goals. But you need to be flexible as well. In fact, I'm just reminded of a talk of Elder Oaks that he gave. That he had his life planned out. He had his first wife who ended up passing away, and then he was remarried. But he wanted to do, he was a lawyer. He was the dean of University of Chicago Law School, and then he was on Utah Supreme Court, and he knew what he wanted to do. But then the church came and talked to him and asked him to, give up what he had thought he was going to be doing and, fulfill that role. And he said he needed to be flexible. And that's another piece of advice that, I wasn't given directly, but something I gleaned from his life and from one of his speeches.
Great. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. For questions, if you just want to raise your hand, call on you and you can stand. And we'd love to know your name and your major, what you're studying. We just have a couple minutes left, but there's a chance for you to, whatever questions we didn't cover, or if there's something you want to go back and talk a little bit about more, please. Stand and tell us your name and your major.
I'm Sherry Vance. I'm an Asian Studies major in American training. You mentioned that you took loans out for your schooling. Was debt management part of your decision to decide that you keep working and your husband become a stay-at-home dad, or what role did debt management play in your decision?
So the question is, you took out loans when you were going to school and also to subsidize your study abroad. What role did debt management play in that? How did you think about that, and how's that worked out? Debt is obviously a very big issue.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I took 2 years off between undergrad and law school, and I was working so that I could help pay for my husband to go finish up his undergrad. And then we both decided it was a mutual decision that I should go to law school. And when I got through law school, I was actually, when I graduated, I remember I was 4 months pregnant with my first child, and we just decided that it did play a role. I could make more money than my husband could at that time, and although I want to say that it definitely was part of the decision, but it was also a decision that we made together, and that we really sought inspiration for. So yes, I think in answer to your question, the short answer is yes, it did play a role. The nice thing, though, especially now being outside of Utah, is looking back at my school debt. It was minuscule compared to the people that I'm working with. I have people that went to some of the Ivy League law schools, and they have $200,000 worth of debt, and I was telling them that I had $25,000, and they were just awestruck. And so, yes, debt needs to play a role in deciding what you're doing. But I think we're also fortunate here, and I believe I understand. I was in your situation once before where it was hard to make ends meet. It was hard to, pay for food. It was hard to make through, get where I needed to be. But you also are really blessed here at BYU. You have an amazing education for a fraction of what some of your colleagues and your counterparts throughout the country are getting. But I completely understand, and it does play a role. And it did play a role in our life.
Other questions? Please.
Nick Hafen. I'm a law student here, but I was a Middle East Studies major as well. and I will be in Chicago doing restructuring work next summer.
Oh, nice.
So I'm
Well, you'll have to
curious-
come to some of our luncheons, so make sure we'll get you on the list.
I'm curious about if you've been involved in pro bono work and service outside of your career, throughout your career.
So the question's about pro bono and service work.
Yeah, that is a good question. I have done some pro bono work, and we're encouraged, or my firm encourages to do pro bono work. Again, with managing time and managing my family and things like that, I have chosen not to focus a lot of resources on pro bono work because I try to focus on my church callings and my family, and so that's kind of how I've worked that. But at the same time, I do try to do pro bono work, at least some pro bono work each year. And in fact, next Saturday, we did this last year too. There is an organization in DuPage County in Chicago. It's an outskirts. It's one of the collar counties. It's World Relief, and we have the opportunity to work with refugees and those individuals who are trying to get citizenship in the United States. And I was very fortunate to do that last year, and I'm excited to do it again this year. And so that's an opportunity, and it's interesting to me because they do open it up to everyone to come and help, but only lawyers can actually sit down and go through the forms. And and I never quite really appreciated all the things that my law degree can help me do, and the things that I can do and help others because of my law degree. Where some of the others from, we had some from our church that were helping out and kind of being runners and getting papers where they needed to be. I had the opportunity to actually feel that I was sitting down and helping somebody with their form. There was a woman who was a refugee from Somalia at that point, and she was with her friend, and she was still scared. I mean, it was a great experience, and so I don't want to downplay pro bono because it's important, and there's so many wonderful things that you can do to help those around. I wish that I had more time to do more, and I'm hoping actually now that I've got my 14 years behind me, I can have some more time and more opportunity to do pro bono work. And there's a wonderful, in fact, when you're in Chicago, I can have you talk with another woman that's out in Chicago that works, and she is over her pro bono for her firm, and she's doing hundreds of hours of pro bono every year, and it's an amazing opportunity that she has. And she's been able to work herself into an amazing position at her job where she's over pro bono. So there's a lot of great opportunities, and I think at the end of the day, it's kind of time management as well, and trying to figure out what is best for you and your circumstances, your family at that point in life.
Maybe one last question.
Yeah.
Please.
My name is Jared Dyer, econ and poli-sci major. I had a question about, as you worked your way through the law career field, if you've had times where you come into situations that maybe were not completely in line with your standards, or you just struggled a little bit with the case you were dealing with and how you navigated that.
So the question is dealing with your personal standards and if that's ever been an issue in your legal career.
I have to say, I have been very fortunate to work with people that have high standards as well, and that was another thing that was interesting for me coming and growing up in Utah is that I work with a lot of other Christian and Jewish people at my firm, and they have high standards. In fact, sometimes they're telling me, they're like, no, we can't do that. I'm like, oh, well, that's a good point. I'm glad you pointed that out. So there's people that, it's helpful to surround yourself with good people, but at the same time, those same individuals, and this is something, anybody who lives outside of Utah is going to have to deal with, is we go to client functions, we go to different things where everyone is drinking, everybody, and I shouldn't say everyone, but there's situations that they've been drinking too much, and it's fascinating to me still. I mean, I've lived outside of Utah for over a decade, and just how everything still revolves around the consumption of alcohol, and how they don't stop when they should be stopping. Like, well, you should probably put the brakes on now. But so it's those types of situations where I've had to deal with people saying, well, why aren't you drinking and why are you Mormon? Those types of questions, but it's not really ethical. But it's a standard issue for me. And trying to ensure that everyone knows around me that I'm LDS and that's the reason why I don't drink. And there have been some people that have said, well, we feel awkward around you because you're not drinking. But then there's other people that I've been surprised at the people that say, well, you're just like a vegan, right? You know, I'm not going to not go to dinner with a vegan just because they don't eat meat. And and I like, that's a good point. So I'm amazed at the people that are out there and the caliber of people that you can run into, LDS and non-LDS. So luckily, I mean, from my perspective, I haven't had to deal with major ethical dilemmas in my practice, but I do have to deal with standards outside of my practice in my legal career.
Well, thanks for your questions. As we wrap up, I mentioned that Karin is a member of the International Advisory Board of the Kennedy Center. It's a group that's been going on for about 5 years. We have representatives from all around the world. A third of our representatives live outside the United States. A third of them live somewhere outside of Utah, and a third live in Utah. It's a diverse group, and we look forward to you as future alumni to get involved with the Kennedy Center, to stay involved. There are a lot of different ways that alumni are engaging, and we hope to see more engagement through funding scholarships, our Global Opportunity Initiative, through mentoring, through helping students with internships and advice and all kinds of things like that. To that point, we have a couple members of the advisory board, Serge Patello, who is a Kennedy Center graduate, works in international business, and David Kirkham, who is the academic director of the BYU London Center that we manage in London. He's taught political science classes as an adjunct at the law school, can talk about careers in the military, careers in international organizations. Both of them are available to do some mentoring appointments with students tomorrow afternoon. So those of you who are interested in meeting with them for a 15-minute appointment, please stop by the Advisement Center in 273, and you can set up an appointment for tomorrow. There may be other alumni in town that might be able to meet as well. And then the online mentoring will be launching in January. You'll have a chance to interact with all kinds of great alumni like Karin, and to get advice like this all year round. So on behalf of the David M. Kennedy Center for International Studies, please join me in thanking our 2017 honored alumni, Karin Berg.